everyone. Warm welcome back. If you are a frequent, the doctor will see you now. And if you've chanced upon us in looking for author chat around crime fiction, well, welcome for a first time. And what a first time to be with us. I wonder if many of you out there have a favourite author, have an author whose work you really enjoy, that sense of waiting for their next book to come out, and, well, you just can't wait. Well, today's author, for me, is one of those. When you have had a taste of their writing, the power with which they write, and then you wait and you wait. But as it says, all good things come to those who wait. And I am so thrilled to welcome Sarah Moorhead into The Doctor Will See You Now. Sarah, it is glorious to see you. How are you?
Oh, Jackie, it's gorgeous to see you as well. I'm doing very well. I'm on summer holidays from school,
Yeah,
which is always a good time. Even with the rain, it's always nice to be able to
yeah.
lie in and have a coffee and read a chapter before you start your day. So I'm in a good form, thank you.
I am so pleased to hear that. And as I say, shall we do a holding up to the camera of what has been long awaited?
Look at this.
Ta-da! So Sarah's got the real deal. I've got the proof copy, but I think it does a lovely job together. So this
And
book,
look at my
look
little
at the
necklace. Oh,
jewelry,
and look what I
rocking.
got. I got a little piece of gold foil. Can you see on the monitor? So it looks like it's moving. Ooh, I got gold
Yeah,
foil, Jack. Gold foil.
you are. I must get hold of one of those. So The Treatment is your latest novel, um, and I wonder, um, just to set us off, because again, that sense of, to me, you are a perfect example of not giving up. If I'm right, if my memory serves me well, because Nana's getting a bit gaga here, but your journey in your work being published, it started in lockdown, did it not?
Well, my journey's being published started 2 weeks before lockdown when my first novel, Witness X, came out.
Yeah,
And lockdown did have a quite a detrimental effect. I felt really lucky at first because when you first get published and you don't really know anything about the industry, you have levels of you have sort of plateaus that you want to reach. So they reckon for every 100 people who want to write a novel, 2 people do it. For every, take those two people who do it, for every 2 people who try and write a novel, 2 people might finish it. And then for every 100 people who finish a novel, 2% might get an agent. So every time you get onto one of these levels, I've written a book, I'm on that plateau.
yeah,
I've got an agent, I'm on that plateau. And then finally I got a book deal and I thought it was wonderful. I got a book deal with one of the big five. I thought I've reached a plateau, that's it. But
yeah,
then you don't realize then that's just when the journey starts. And of course, you go through edits and you go through rewriting. And after all this, I brought Witness X out. And then, unfortunately, my publisher dropped me. Now, they said it was because it was a little bit too sci fi for them. So they wheeled over to the office next door, which was Galant's, and they said it's not sci-fi enough for them. And I was having this sort of crisis, think, well, who am I? What sort of writer am
yeah,
I?
yeah,
So finally, then my agent, for her own reasons, not necessarily because of that, she was downsizing and she dropped me. So I had gone from this wonderful euphoria of feeling I've made it, I'm going to be a published author, I've achieved something, to being all the way back down to the bottom of the mountain. And then during lockdown, because we were teaching online, I had a bit of extra time, and I decided, right, I'm going to pick myself up, I'm going to get off the canvas, I'm going to start again. So I had this book. What you find with a lot of authors is they have an idea that kind of percolates for a couple of years in their
uh-huh,
brain. So I've been percolating this particular idea, and I thought, right, then I'm going to get up, I'm going to write this book over lockdown, and I'm just going to try again. And I did, and then I got a new agent, Ed, which I was over the moon about. And then I found a new publisher. So it is really a story of resilience, I think.
I think it is. I think without a doubt, and I should say as well, just a massive thanks to Trevor Wood, because he was the one that introduced us. And again, I'm really grateful for him and his energy in, in saying, no, seriously, this. And so here we are today with the treatment published by Canelo. Again, shout out to Canelo, because they are taking on some, to my mind, really cracking authors, contemporary authors, people whose work spans lots of different subgenre within the idea of crime and mystery
Yeah,
fiction things, um, and who are not afraid. This is what I love. They're not
yeah,
afraid to
yeah.
say, well, it doesn't exactly fit here or there, but the story is amazing. And I think as readers, I don't think we necessarily need a pigeonhole, or a file
100%.
to put it
Yeah,
in.
yeah. I think the booksellers need to find out which shelf to put us on. But whereas what I love, I mean, there's so many things I love about Canela, but one of them is that they were brave enough not to pump out the same old stuff that some of the publishers, they want to play it safe, they want to sell stuff that
Yeah,
they know
yeah,
sells. And I think that's underestimating their readers. People want a fresh take on a genre. They want something exciting, they want something a bit different, a palate cleanser. So I think Canelo
yeah.
are 100% doing the right thing. And on top of that, they couldn't have done any more to make me feel welcome, to make me feel promoted, to make connections for me. And I just cannot sing their praises enough. I think they're wonderful. And as for Trevor Wood, I mean, I love Trevor Wood. He is the godfather of, to your godmother, of the Northern crime writing scene. The pair of you together just do so much for us, and they're it's just so wonderful, and keep us connected.
Which I think, because I mean, I know Trevor's on one side. I mean, all writers are readers. I know that, but not all readers are writers. But I think, from my perspective, it's like I want as many readers as possible to meet as many authors as possible. That sense of, somebody might say, I, I like reading, but I've not really found an author that I like yet. I've not,
Are you a matchmaker, Dr. Jackie Collins? Are you the
let's
matchmaker?
let's look at it like that.
I like
Let's look at it like that, because I
that.
really, there is it's a bit like there's a book for everyone. I believe that, and I do think, this murky, scary genre that we work in. I just think it's one of the easiest to find those connections to,
Yes.
yeah.
I also think with crime fiction, it's very popular with women of a certain age, the age category that I have moved into, and I love it. I'm what I call it, embracing the crone. I want to be a wise
Yes.
old woman. I am tired of the society in which we live, and there's hints of this in my new book, which I can't really talk much about because I'm
Oh,
still wrestling with it.
uh-huh.
I'm tired of a society which just thinks that youth and beauty and being super sexy is the be all and end all, because it's really, really not. I mean, who doesn't love their nana? Who doesn't love, an
Exactly.
older lady teacher or whatever, or their mum? I think we really need to embrace and celebrate this age group. And these are people who are, again, my audience and my contemporaries. So embrace the crone. Let's get with these wise women.
Totally, totally. And don't underestimate, again, don't underestimate their their taste in writing, their willingness to explore.
Yeah.
Um
Their
and
intelligence, their experience.
yeah,
Imagine as a writer, we're trying to resonate with our reader, and imagine the sorts of life experiences these people have had and the things that we can write about and we can resonate between.
yeah.
It's wonderful, isn't it?
It really is. And I think, again, in the treatment, um I think the questions that you bring us, those big questions, um, but that you wrap so beautifully in the writing. Um, I have to say, I don't know if you are familiar with the Australian author Paul Hardesty.
Oh no.
No, a render author, Paul Hardesty, um, and his most recent book, and of course, because we're here now and I can't remember the title, so that's uberly embarrassing.
I'll look it
But
up. I'll look it
yeah,
up.
have a look at it. His is it's a dystopian in the not too distant future, very much looking at climate change and very much looking at um, our generations being made to pay for the mistakes that we've made. The reason why I bring this up again is because it's that idea of people like yourself, Sarah, who provide reads for us that get us to reflect on what society is like and where it could go and how we could deal with things. Um, you know,
You know,
so
it's funny because I've spent nearly 30 years teaching, and I believe in teaching that we don't teach people what to think, but how to think.
yeah, yeah,
And in a way, I want to move away. I'm getting to an age where I'd like to move away from teaching now. I'd like to start taking life a bit easier. And but still, there's this urge inside of me to get people to look, to reflect,
yeah.
to think. So I feel really lucky that it's kind of I can do that in my writing because I feel as though it's my part of my mission, part of my life's purpose.
Yeah, and the great thing is, you don't have to test the readers at the end. You don't have to do all
Don't
the
have to mark
marking.
anything, no
Yeah,
marking.
yeah. Honestly, I shouldn't say that. But I also, I mean, I love working with the students, but that sense of getting them to consider, getting them to view things, and not don't just learn these facts. Don't just
I mean, particularly in RE, RE back in the day, you had to sort of learn years ago, learn the catechism, learn St. Mark's Gospel or whatever. Well, that's not going to help. That's not
no,
going to help. What you need to
no.
do is reflect, to think, to apply. It's funny, and I do bring up Stuart Turton quite a lot because it's just one of my highlights of my life. But I taught Stuart when he was a gangly sixth former back way back in the day, and this he said, he's super intelligent, and he said nobody had really asked him his opinion before or got him just to think about things or left him with questions
Yeah,
and not provided any answers. And as you probably know, you've seen on my Instagram feed that we connected over Twitter, which was just hilarious because some random person said, what were your memories of a small town nightclub? And I said, well, when I was a brand new teacher, we worked in Widnes, and we used to go to top of the town, or toppers as they call it, after work on Friday nights. And I've been following Stu for a while and not really realised who he was, and he'd been following me, and he went, "Oh my God, are you Miss Moorhead?" And I went, "Oh my God, yes, I am." Stuart's language is piratical, by the way, and it was a
yeah,
little bit more stronger than
yeah.
that. And then during in mid lockdowns, he came up to see me and he brought me a copy of the Seven Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle. And he said, he said, all the questions that you raised in me during those lessons got me thinking, and all those thoughts went into this book. And I always wanted to find you to say thank you. And
Beautiful, beautiful.
it was just my Oscars moment. I thought I have done something. I have helped, if not just one person, to think and to create something. I was like, oh my God, I was so grateful for that.
Yeah, yeah. And again, I think, we never know, in that profession, we never
Yeah,
know
no,
the effect that you can have. And every now and again, it does come out. And that is
yeah.
beautiful. It's called The Forcing, by the way, Paul's book, The Forcing. Yeah, not lost it yet. Anyway, come on, we're here to talk about the treatment.
Yeah. What about
Uh,
this wonderful book here? Look at the cover
exactly
on that.
that
Look at the
one,
cover.
that one. So having gone through the time that you explained to us, um, when did this idea start to roll around in your head? Um, before you tell us actually what the idea is, so let's talk about the germination before we actually get to, the flowering.
Well, when I was a kid, my mum always called me the magpie because every time I saw anything shiny, I'd pick it up and put it in my pocket. And I've got a sort of, an old-fashioned chest upstairs that we used to keep with the kids, all these shiny little bits and jewels and coins in. And I think as a writer, you're always going to be a magpie. And I've been picking up things since I was tiny. So part of the germination of this book was things like Maslow's levels of needs.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and just this idea that people have, that the first level is they need sort of safety and security, then they'll need food and shelter, and then they'll need relationships, and it goes on like this. And when I was reading Colin Wilson's The Outsider, and he actually mentioned this, and I was thinking about the way that crime years and years ago, crime would be about getting your basic needs met. I'm going to break into this house because I need somewhere to stay. I'm going to steal a loaf of bread because I need something to eat.
Mhm.
And then it was kind of it moved forward in the sort of 20th century to sort of sex crimes where people were taking power, and it became more about sort of sexuality, and then it moves up to sort of serial killers where people are expressing themselves, and it's like self-actualization via murder. I haven't really explained that very clearly, but I think it would take a PhD to do it. But you kind of get where I'm coming from. So I was kind of thinking, about people and why they commit crime.
Mhm.
And I was thinking, if I'm a bit Pollyanna, Jackie, I would love it if, going back to older women, I think if nans ran the government, if we ran the country, it would be like sort of, there'd be lots of slippers and biscuits, and people would sit on the naughty step, and it'd be a lot more fair, and you'd be told off if you were being unfair. And it's this idea that
Yeah,
if
but that you'd know that you were loved. Even if you're on the naughty step, you'd know that you were loved.
and there would still be biscuits,
Yep.
you'd be forgiven. So in my little Pollyanna world, I think surely if people's needs were met, then there'd be less crime. Surely, like, there's so many people who commit crime because of their emotional dysfunction. There's 20% of prison population are ex-soldiers who haven't been cared for when they came back
Yeah.
from fighting. And these things like seem really obvious to me, that if you take care of people's needs, and as I work in a convent school, the Sisters of Mercy, and they were very much into taking care of people's needs, to put them on the straight and narrow. And when they came over from Ireland into Liverpool, where I'm from, as you might know, they would say that we would look after the family. We'd look after the mum. If the mum got sick, if the mum was unwell, take care. We'd go in, we'd take over the mother's role, and we'd keep that family strong, because a strong family means a strong society. And I do think these kind of things playing into it. And then on top of that, I'm really kind of struck by psychopathy. I mean, it's hard not to be, really.
Mhm.
And I know all psychopaths aren't serial killers. We have a lot of psychopaths who are very functioning in society. Sort of, they can do very difficult jobs like being a CEO and sack a lot of people without letting emotion interfere,
Yeah.
or being a surgeon and doing a very difficult operation on somebody very vulnerable, and not letting that emotion
Mhm.
spoil their work, or whatever. So and then reading about, so when I was a kid, we didn't have the internet, obviously. My brother and I liked reading. He was very much into forensic science. He became a forensic scientist
Wow.
eventually. But we used to read this magazine called Murder Case Book in the 80s, because kind of serial killing came out, kind of became to the fore in the 80s. And again, I sort of think that reading the murder book case file, or murder case books they were called, and once a week you'd have this file, this little magazine about a particular serial killer. So we used to read these books. So I think all those things went into like a real mishmash of into the teapot of my brain. And then of course, being brought up Irish Catholic, I was very much into thinking about reconciliation, confession, forgiveness, good versus evil. I'm a
Mhm.
big Star Wars fan. I think any good story's got these elements of light and dark. So I think all these things. And then when I was a new teacher, anyone who was taught RE in Catholic schools, and sort of the sort of the 90s, we had a book by Sister Anne Burke called Dimensions of Christianity. And there were, we looked at theories of punishment, sort of retribution, rehabilitation, deterrence. And all these things have gone into a big stew, and the treatment came out of all that.
beautiful, beautiful. I have a quote from another Northeast author, Robert Scragg, about the treatment, and he says, "A terrifying exploration of how far we can push the boundaries of science and criminal justice." He says, "Could not recommend highly enough." I totally agree with you, Rob. But the
Well,
treatment,
that is because, see, we were brought up again, you know, very much a Catholic family, but also a very much a scientific family. My dad's a scientist. He was a dental surgeon who studied medicine, and as I say, my elder brother was into forensic science. So, and my younger brother eventually became a probation officer, but then he went into lecturing on criminal justice. So we're all, obviously, there's something
yeah.
in the way we were brought up and looking at ethics and morality and religion and science. So for me, they're kind of happy bedfellows, and I was happy to bring them together and work them together. A lot of people think they're quite polarized, but there's kind of an interesting liminal space between them where the treatment came from.
Mm. So tell us about the premise of the treatment.
So the treatment is set in a slightly futuristic society, sort of 5 minutes into the future, where justice, the justice system has become privatized, and there's four tiers where people get treated. So the first tier is when people are committing crime because they have no food, they have no shelter, they're out of money, then the government provides these things for them. The second tier is where people are committing crime because of emotional difficulties, or that psychological upset or addiction, or, as I say, they've come back from war, and these people are taken to a fairly pleasant camp where they can have therapy and they can have treatment and they can feel they can get themselves strong again to become better citizens. Um, and the third tier up is when people, they often talk about criminals as being mad, bad, or sad. So obviously the people in the third tier, they're bad, they're naughty, they're doing things that they know are wrong, but for no reason other than that they're bad. And so we have a version of aversion therapy, which is when they get done, they get a series of sort of hypnosis and medication to believe that what they did to other people was done to them. And then the fourth level up, they are the incurables, and that's kind of, you have to discover what
Yeah.
that is.
And we won't say too much about that fourth level, except it's called Siberia.
Mm.
And I thought it was interesting, Siberia, rather than, it made me think about, that very British thing of being sent to Coventry.
Yes,
You're not sent to Coventry, get sent to Siberia.
yes, yes.
Yeah, yeah. I wondered about, because you mentioned Maslow's hierarchy, or that triangle, and here, around that structure of those four tiers, was it always four? You didn't want to go beyond four? With four, you had enough, or were there other tiers that along the way you've discarded?
Um, Not that I've discarded, but I, I was trying to go for the logic really in it. It would
Uh-huh.
make sense to me that if you're hungry, you'll steal food. So let's give
Yeah,
you food. But then I also, to be honest, I'm very much I'm obsessed with the idea that a person is body, heart, mind, and soul. I think that that holistic approach to a person is really important. And again, I'm giving you a few hints about my next book. That's a big part of the book that I'm writing at the moment. So I think this idea that soldiers, when they go to war, they're so focused on the physicality of themselves that when they come back, their emotions are up the wall, that
yeah,
they've got PTSD. They might have sort of spiritual problems, the guilt or whatever, or those sorts of issues. So it was this idea that we focus on the physicality, the intellect, then we go up to the spiritual. We kind of work our way through sort of
yeah.
really the four areas there. Yeah.
And this company now, this the glories of privatization, uh, the known as Janus Justice.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
tell
Well,
us, tell.
if you know my writing, I do love a bit of mythology.
Yeah,
I
come
do
on,
love a
tell
bit
us
of
about this.
Well, for instance, in Witness X, the machine there is called the Cassandra that helps the psychologists, the neuroscientists see into other people's minds. And Cassandra back in the day was seen as somebody who would see the future and would not be believed. So I do love a bit of that. And in my other book, my character's called Kyra, because in Greek you have chronological time, which is things that happen in a linear fashion, and then you have chirological time, which is important events happening. So I called her Kyra in the sense that she's seeing these important events, but they're not linear and they're quite confusing. So in the treatments, Janice, it's this sense this two-faced God in the beginning
Mm.
of the year. That's where we get the word January from. And he looks back over what has happened in the past, and then he looks to the future. So in a way, it's partly to do with how people can be rehabilitated. People can say, well, I used to do this, but now I'm going to have a brighter
Yeah,
future.
different way. Yeah. Huh?
Yeah, for sure. So a lot of it's to do with that, really. And then my main character in this book is called Grace, which is undeserved mercy, and she's very much somebody who believes in mercy.
Yeah, Grace Gunnarsson. And when the book opens, I love the prologue. Well, it's sad, but I love the way you set this up. It's 27 years earlier, and we see Grace then as a young girl.
Yeah.
Um, the development of Grace over the time that this novel, was in its gestation. Did Grace appear to you fully formed, or has Grace developed as you were writing the novel?
Definitely developed as I was writing the novel. Um, I think I'm partly a discovery writer these days. I discover as I'm going along what's
Lovely. Yeah,
right.
huh? Yeah.
I think there's a lot of things in my brain that are happening subconsciously, thank goodness, because if you told me to sit and plan a story, I'd be like, I don't know what to do. But there's things that go on in your brain that develop without you really being that aware of them, and then they come out in the writing. Funnily enough, I've had a little bit of trouble sort of start. I wouldn't say writer's block because I don't really believe in that. I think you just got to get on with the business. I think you just got to sit down and get on with the business. And so I had a bit of trouble getting this story to start. And so what I did was I put away the laptop and I got out my trusty fountain pen and
Yes.
a nice foolscap, as my dad would call it, foolscap.
Yeah.
And I just started writing. And I definitely think there's some magic that happens between the brain and the pen. Maybe it's just a very slight pause that your synapses just fire off and start going, and then we're in full flow now. So that really helped.
I have another thought as well on this. I like what you say about, because I'm an old-fashioned girl as well, and the fountain pen. But when looking at students' work, if they've all used Times New Roman or Garamond or Calibri font size 12, well, there's no personality there.
Sure. For sure.
But when people are writing, handwriting, there's a character already in how these letters and words are formed.
Yes, 100%. Couldn't agree more.
You
But I mean,
know,
a part of the sort of the characters coming fully formed. I have had a long journey with the planner and pantser and plotter issue because
yeah, yeah.
my first book. So just to go back and look at that again, I wrote my first book. It's called Fragile Lies. It's still in the drawer. It'll probably
Oh,
remain there for time. Um, when I was on maternity leave with my first son, because maternity leave, believe it or not, is really I'd say fecund time because that's a great word.
you
It's
did.
very, very creative. It's
Mhm.
very creative. And I just kind of didn't plan it. Just I used the Nike approach, just do it, get it all down. And it was horrendous trying to edit it because at that point I didn't know how to structure a story. So when I got my first agent, she she got this. We tried to knock the book into shape. It was very difficult. She got me my first publishing deal, and I had to go through a huge process of rewriting and rewriting. Now, I haven't had any formal education in writing or creative writing, but that was
Okay.
such an important experience for me. I was pulling out my hair at times, Jackie. It was so frustrating. But when we went with this book to the publisher, she said, "I like you. I don't like this book, but I like you. What else have you got?" It was like
Oh,
my Dragon's Den moment, you know?
yeah,
So I
yeah.
pulled this idea from nowhere, which eventually ended up as Witness X. I said, "Right, what about this idea?" And she went, "Great, go away and write it." I was like, "Oh my Lord, I, don't know how to structure a book." So again, tried to write it, got pretty frustrated, went through this process of learning with her. She was a really wonderful editor, actually, and I went through this process. So when it came to writing the treatment, I said, "You know what? I'm going to learn how to plan." So I educated myself. I read Story Genius by Lisa Cron, which is
Hmm.
fantastic. The Science of Storytelling by Will Storr. Stealing Hollywood by Alexandra Sokoloff.
Yeah,
John
yeah.
Yorke's The Woods. And my little crib book is Save the Cat Writes a Novel. So when you read all these books and you kind of assimilate this information, then just before I start, I go back and have a quick look at Save the Cat and I sort of try and structure it. So what I think now is then, however, my third book, I went too far into the planning and it just stopped me in my tracks. So what I do now is I use, there is a basic structure to story. We do think in stories. We do understand without being conscious of it how a story works. So now what I do is I put the bones out. I put the skeleton out before I start. And then as I'm writing, the flesh, the muscles, the clothes, the makeup, the hairdo, they all develop and I find them as I go along. Does that make sense? That sounds like quite a long-winded process.
I think no, it totally makes sense. And what excites me most is that you have found a way that works for you. Um, I'm also impressed, by that thing of saying, you know, I'm not sure how to do this. So I'm going to find out how to do it.
Yeah,
That being proactive
yeah.
and bringing things back then to your writing. So I mean, so now, do you feel? Because I know it's always a process and it's always in development and we're always moving on. But do you feel more confident now in thinking a structure should look like this? I know what I need to do in order to get to write those lovely two words at the end.
Yeah, I think so. I think I understand. Um, I think for me, my failing was structure, and so I've kind of wrestled with that. But every time I write a book, I go, I have absolutely no idea how to do this. I've got no idea what I'm doing, and then you just have to, being a writer is the majority of it is resilience. It's taken the knocks, it's taken the rejections, it's taken the starting again, it's taken falling down and getting up off the canvas. And then it's taking every single time you sit down to write, you just go, I am going to do this, I am going to do this, I am going to do this, because you often think you can't.
And in that, is there joy? I mean, is there pleasure to be had in the writing? Do you enjoy it, or because it, it could it could turn into just that discipline thing, as you say, it's like sit down and just do it. But do you
Yeah,
find joy in that?
of course. I mean, there's obviously going to be the dopamine hit, isn't there? Your brain is going to reward you for
Hmm.
having written a good page or whatever. Um, and then there's a sense of mission and vocation,
Hmm.
which is important. And I think also, and I've talked about this before, I am kind of neurodiverse. It's not been not to like not to a great degree, but my brain is just full of fireworks all the time, just ping. It's kind of hard to concentrate. I
Hmm.
go from one thing to another, and I suffer with anxiety because of that. But when I sit down and focus on my writing, it's calming. It's that concentrates. It's peaceful. I'm doing something positive. I feel just like in my stride. So, but there's other times I just want to throw the laptop out the window. So, it's. I think I couldn't not do it. I think I
Mm.
couldn't not.
Thank you for sharing that. The treatment. What are you proudest about this book? What makes your heart sing that you've created this story?
Well, one thing that I didn't really realize I was doing until I finished the book was, and I think crime writing does this quite a lot. There is a commentary in society about it,
Mhm.
and I feel really, really strongly about injustice. I feel very strongly about that. I mean, it's partly being a Scouser, it's partly the way we were treated in the 80s by the government, and certain people whose names shall not be mentioned were going to leave us to rot.
Yes.
And look how we came back. Yeah, look how we came back.
Love it.
Um, and there's things like Hillsborough where it just showed the spirit of the city, where
Mhm.
we fought and fought to get justice. I hate the fact that there's unfairness in the world and that people suffer so much. And part of writing the book was like, in my world, in my head, to try and alleviate some of the chaos in the world. And some of it mentions ecology and sort of looking after the environment. Some of it mentions helping people who need it. So those things are kind of cool. What I didn't know I could do, maybe that's a good question. What I didn't know I could do, but we did, was to really research and look into the idea of empathy, which I think is the highest human quality. I think empathy is just the best of the best in a human. And you look at any world religion, and they've got quotes sort of you know um love your neighbor as yourself, do as you will be done by,
Yeah.
love others, that kind of thing. So I think it's a real aim. So I wanted to look at psychopathy versus empathy, because obviously psychopaths lack empathy. um excuse me. And I ended up sort of trying to research it and understanding some parts, um but mainly triggered by Levi Belfield. Do you remember the way he treated people and his real cruelty? And for some reason, he really stuck in my head. Out of all the serial killers, he really
Mhm.
made me mad, made me want to write a book. So I tried to research a bit of psychopathy, and I ended up getting in touch with a neuroscientist, a doctor in Walton Neurological Centre, which is only a few miles from my house, actually. And it was during lockdown, and I'd put on Twitter or somewhere, can anybody help me with this? I need to find out about psychopathy and empathy. And Dr. Jane Martlew was so kind and gave me a number of hours on Zoom where we chatted these things over.
Brilliant.
Yeah, and between us, we found out so much about empathy. She told me that empathy is an umbrella term for lots of different things that go on in the brain. And there's different types of empathy, such as cognitive, where you can understand how somebody might feel. And psychopaths have this in buckets because it's very good for manipulation. So if I say this, you feel that, therefore I can manipulate you. Then there's
Mhm.
also sort of emotional empathy, where you can understand how somebody feels. So somebody falls over, hurts themselves, you go, oh, that's so sad. Compassionate empathy is when you want to help them. And then there's somatic empathy, which is a sort of neurological thing where your brain can sort of experience what it might feel like. So if you fell over and banged your knee, my brain, my mirror neurons would create a similar feeling in my body, so I would kind of know how you feel. So oh my god, it was just so amazing to learn. After so long teaching, I love learning, and you do learn
Yes.
in school. You learn
Yes.
so much from
Yeah.
the kids, but to learn this sort of fascinating stuff, I really, really enjoyed it.
I'm so grateful for you sharing, the how this all came into being as it sits on the shelves now for us. Yeah, and it's definitely shiny, that shiny cover that's there. What would you, I mean, again, influencing people. What would you like us to take away? Apart from a really enjoyable read.
What I'd like people, I think, I'd like people to think about the people in society who are no use to us, the people in society who suffer, the people in society who don't have enough food. I think, me too. I'm a human being, right? So I'm judgmental. I'm really judgmental, right? We're all really judgmental. And it's so easy to say, oh,
Yeah.
people in prisons deserve to be there. They brought
Hmm.
it on
Yeah.
themselves, blah, blah, blah. But, and I'm not political as such, in the sense of political parties, but we need to improve our society. We do. We need to
Mhm.
take care of other people. There's lots of things that could be done that would prevent so much bad stuff that happens now. That sounds so idealistic and so Pollyanna, as I say, but it's how I feel.
I think it's really important though, because if we don't have those ideals, if we don't aim for something, and even if it's like, let's just say it's unrealistic, it might not be, but let's say, but if we don't try for that, then nothing is going to happen, is it? And I'm a firm believer in everybody with one small act of kindness or one
Sure.
small act of support,
Yeah.
put those small acts together, it makes a movement, it changes things.
Oh,
So,
definitely, definitely. And I think deep down I must just be a natural educator. I must just be a flagger upper of things. I'm a flagger upper. And I'm like thinking, so for instance, it is kind of a religious idea to say that a strong family makes strong society. But it's also quite a logical, quite a
yeah,
sociological idea. And
yeah,
when I had my boys, I mean, and as I'm looking outside my window now, and we live in a lovely area with trees right by the university. I'm lucky. I'm a lucky person in lots of ways. I'm really blessed. But I still, as a young mom with little tiny people, I went to Sure Start. I needed support, and it was wonderful to sit
mhm,
around with a bunch of other parents and see their babies and have baby yoga or baby
yeah,
massage or advice about how they when they're teething, and there'd be a couple of nurses there, and you'd have a cup of tea and you'd feel like a human being. Now that's an investment in society, and what happened? Got cut,
yeah, yeah,
right? And so for me, little things like that, or in the treatment, I talk about oil rigs being replaced by sort of prisoners get sent there to um, collect plastics from the sea. This idea that we're not going to use oil in the future, possibly, but we need to start cleaning it. Look at the world we live in. Just look at the world. What are we doing? What are
yeah,
we doing?
yeah.
So there is, it's not a preachy book, and
Oh,
it's
it's
not a,
not.
it's not
No,
a
no,
hand,
not at
it,
all.
no, and it's not a handbook. It's not like a psychopathy textbook or anything like that. But these things that just kind of rile me, boil my blood, they're in
Yeah,
there.
yeah. And I totally agree. You can feel that, but it's not like, oh, will you? No, not at all. Because bringing it back to the personal, and the link that there is between Grace, because we should say that Grace, we're introduced to her when she's a girl, but she grows up and she becomes a psychiatrist working for an offender treatment program.
Janice
Yeah,
Justice, yeah, yeah. And she's
yeah,
happy to work, she's happy to work in tier 1 and 2 where you're meeting people's needs and you're helping people to get better. And then her boss, Conrad, he says, I need you to work in tier 3 today. And tier 3 is aversion therapy. And she's just like, I am not into
no,
this
do
at
yeah,
all.
yeah,
What's strange, I feel, reflecting on the book is that there's this tier system where you can really agree with the first two parts, but the second two parts you're like, no, no, no. And then in the society in the book, a lot of people are really for it because they want, people do want retribution, they do want
mm,
reparation, they do want to punish people. But then in the book, there's also a lot of people are like, what about human rights? Why aren't we looking after these people? Why aren't we supporting these people? Is there a kinder way to do it? And then also in the book, there's vigilantes where they are, um, you know, I think with something like aversion therapy, you have somebody going in and they're having this punishment, and then they're out in a week. And so when you have suffered from a crime, when you've been a victim of a crime, you're not going to be in and out in a week. You're not going to be over that in a week.
mm.
That could affect you for the whole of
Rest
your
of your
life.
life. Yeah,
So
yeah,
the vigilantes are saying, well, we don't agree with this treatment because it's not harsh enough because their victims weren't solved. The problems of the victims weren't solved in a week. So we're going to do something.
yeah. It reminds me of Argentina and the dirty war in the 80s, and how you know many of those, the military who committed such horrendous crimes were then pardoned and were out, you know, on the streets. You could be sat next to, the person who had treated you so horrendously
Or
in the cinema. Yeah.
closer to home in in Ireland,
Yes.
closer
Yeah.
to home,
Yeah.
similar kind of stuff going on.
Yeah. Yeah. And so then how do we find that balance? And of course, as we're saying, the treatment isn't a and here's how we could make it wonderful. But I think it's important for us to mull over those questions. We are part of society, and we do have a responsibility, I think, no matter, what we do in life, how much input we have in anything, that we have a voice, and we have I think, some level of responsibility to try and make, even if it's just in our immediate circle.
Absolutely, absolutely. No, I run a little Justice and Peace group up the road in the local parish. So we have about 50 kids, aged between about 9 and 20. And we just do little things. Just
Yeah.
we invite people in to talk to the kids about the world and their charities or whatever. Like, so for instance, a couple of weeks ago we had a group called Knife Savers. So sorts of knife crimes becoming a big thing, and it affects young teenagers, and it's just horrendous. And there was a horrible case in Liverpool last year, as you know, a young girl dying. So the surgeons came in and they showed my kids how to stem the bleeding after a knife attack. Now, little things like that, how wonderful is that my kids can go out, and if hopefully not, but if a situation like that
Yeah.
came about, there'll be something that they could do. So
Mm.
being proactive, even in little ways, and there's all sorts of other charities that come in. But if we kind of share those ideas, if we make connections, if we just try to, as you rightly say, just little tiny things um, in the local area, in the wider world, it'd be great, wouldn't it?
Mm. There's one last aspect I'd like us to talk about, if that's okay, and try not to give too much away. But Grace is met. She has these questions. You've already said, she's not happy about going to tier 3 and working there, but it's brought even closer to home with her childhood friend Remy. Can you tell us a little bit about Remy and what that dilemma is that she comes up against?
Well, Grace and Remy have got an interesting friendship because they were technically both brought up the same. But Grace has gone one way and Remy's gone the other way. So he's been in quite a bit of trouble. Um, but because of the nature of the punishments, he's going to be sent to tier 4, and Grace cannot live with that. So she feels as though, if tier 4 really is for the incurables, and she figures, if I can find a cure for him, maybe I can save him.
Read on, readers and viewers, to find out whether she does and whether she doesn't. Now, we should say that according to the information I've received, Sarah, the book is out on the 31st of August.
That is correct.
Yeah, yeah. So please don't be rushing to the shops now. However, you can always do that pre-order. I highly encourage you to do so. Um, and again, if you don't normally, for your crime fiction reading, if you don't normally go into this kind of dystopian writing, I encourage you, I even dare you, to have a wee dip into Sarah Moorhead's writing. Get yourself lost in there. Come out the other side and say, well, I wouldn't normally go there, but I'm so glad I went this way this time. Definitely. Sarah, it just remains for me to wish you all the very best. As I say, when we started, totally thrilled to see the treatment out, totally thrilled to hear that fizzy brain of yours, yeah, that those ideas are finding shape and that we are able to enjoy them. So every success with this. And I look forward to seeing you at the end of the year at Newcastle Noir. Yeah, we'll talk
I'll,
further about this.
Thank you so much for the time that you give us. Thank you so much for everything you do for us authors. It's just so
It's a pleasure.
wonderful.
It's a
And
pleasure.
and just to say, if anybody wants to get in touch or to follow me, I've got a website which is sarahmoorhead.com, and I'm on Instagram, which is Sarah Moorhead Author. And it would be lovely to hear from people or share ideas or see what they think.
Brilliant. Yeah, please do that because Sarah, yeah, Sarah, time with you, Sarah, it's it just runs away, and there's never enough time to talk about all the things,
All the
um,
things, all the
all the
things.
things, my darling. All the very best, and I'll see you soon. Yeah,
Thanks very much. See you soon. Bye bye.
pleasure. Bye.